Hello, welcome back to the Life Nurse podcast. I said in the last podcast that I probably wasn't going to create one for in between now and when Geneva Watch Days ends, but there was some pretty big news that I think is worth talking about, and that was Rolex's acquisition of Bucherer. This is a big move, and of course Rolex would do it in the typical slow summers that the watch industry sees. So I wanted to sort of go through what happened and sort of the implications that I see from it, and I guess what the watch market is seeing from it. I'll also talk about a new MB&F piece that was released, as I always do, because of course I absolutely love the brand and what they're doing there. So obviously you probably have heard about it, but Rolex has acquired Bucherer, Bucherer being one of the largest watch selling companies in the world. They also sell jewelry as well, so there's more facets to their sort of business model. But obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably interested in their watch industry specifically. This acquisition happened because essentially the current owner, Jörg Bucherer's, he made the decision to sell this company because he didn't have a direct descendant that he could pass the business onto. And so Rolex decided to step in and acquire this really well-established watch retailer. And what they've said is the intentions that they have are to carry forward the legacy of Bucherer's success and to honor the close partnership that has linked both brands since 1924. It's a long time that these two companies have worked together, and so it almost feels like their names are synonymous. As I mentioned, Bucherer is an internationally recognized multi-brand retailer that has locations in Switzerland, in the US, in England, Germany, France, Denmark, and Austria. They're all over the place. They sell, obviously, many different brands, Rolex being one of them, Tudor being another one. They also sell some really high-quality jewelry as well. So they really are an incredible sort of watch and jewelry brand. So it's worth also reminding people who are listening to this podcast that that Bucherer had acquired Tourneau, which was a watch company, a watch distribution company, or I guess a watch retailer, back in 2018, that allowed them to have some additional stores in their network of companies, and it also sort of expanded their sort of e-commerce presence through the Tourneau network. This is an interesting part because obviously this acquisition was announced, but it still is pending the green light from competition authorities to make sure that there aren't any regulatory standards that this acquisition is going to step on. So I guess one of the things that is worth sort of mentioning is, how is Rolex going to be involved in the brand? And based on the statements, Rolex really means that this is a way to essentially maintain their relationship with Bucherer and make sure that Bucherer kind of continues to survive in the way that's that they wanted to. Apparently, the way that the partnership, or I guess the ownership, is going to work is that Bucherer is going to maintain sort of its operational independence, and the existing management team is going to stay intact. They also said that I think there's going to be a non-executive director from Rolex who's going to oversee Bucherer. So it's not like it's going to be a huge mix-up of the management team, which on the face value, I guess that really does make you feel like there's Bucherer will maintain its independence and operating, standards and management team and all that. So it means it's probably going to make, most of the decisions independently. But you have to also realize that they are going to end up reporting up to the Rolex group. And so, that is going to have its implications. Many people have, speculated on things like, Bucherer and Rolex have had a relationship, and maybe they'll be able to get more pieces than other watch retailers, or I guess watch official retailers of Rolex can get. But I don't, we'll say that this isn't probably going to have an impact on the way that works. I think Rolex will operate their, distribution, the same way that they always have, and continue to operate independently. But I think the street is definitely, and by the street I mean, Wall Street and investors are definitely not seeing that as what they think is going to happen. Pretty interestingly, Watches of Switzerland is another sort of big watch company, and their share price dropped off by over 30% after this announcement was made. And I think that is an indication that they think that this partnership between, investors think that this partnership between Bucherer and Rolex might show signs that, Bucherer might get some additional treatment based on this new partnership. In 2020, the CEO of the Watches of Switzerland group, Brian Duffy, said that 53% of his group's sales came from Rolex. And so what investors are obviously looking at is the idea that, if over 53% of your sales are coming from this one company, and they've just decided to essentially buy one of your major competitors, that's going to squeeze probably your access to the largest group of watches that you rely on for your sales. And that's concerning. Now, there's a lot of things that have sort of happened as well. The Rolex Group continues to state that it isn't a strategic move by Rolex to get into retail. It's not something that they're interested in doing. It's purely a way to continue the sort of path of Bucherer, as it had a challenge with finding a new owner. This is pretty interesting to sort of contemplate if you think that Rolex is sort of getting into this market. I think something also to consider, Bucherer has done some pretty interesting things recently too, being certified, having their own certified pre-owned process with Rolex pieces that they just recently came out with. So there's a lot of things that are sort of happening with Rolex and Bucherer that sort of make you question what this move really is about. I think it does, though, add some resilience to what Bucherer is doing as a company. Rolex is a huge company, and when you think about it, if Rolex didn't acquire them, who would actually be buying Bucherer from your Bucherer? It's difficult to really think who would be that company or the individual who would have the liquidity or the ability to structure a deal with this kind of company. Who knows? What I will say, though, from maybe like an enthusiast perspective, is if we believe everything that Rolex is saying, that this is not a way for them to get into retail, this is really a way for them to preserve the Bucherer brand and the partnership that they've had for 90 odd years, or over 90 years. You have to admit that this is a pretty nice end story, as long as it gets through sort of the regulatory affairs. I think a lot of the times you see watch companies or watch retail, watch related businesses get acquired by people who really aren't passionate about watches or passionate about the watch industry, and sometimes that can dilute the company and sort of change the nature of it. Instead of being about watchmaking, it can kind of make it turn on its head and be more about maybe your profit margins and cutting things that aren't profitable, when really it's a big part of the brand as a whole. So if you trust the words that the release have sort of come out with, it at least allows you to say that it's at least in the hands of other watch enthusiasts or people who are interested in preserving this hobby that we really do love. I will say that likely there are going to be some interesting watches that are going to be released at Bucherer, maybe some Rolex or Tudor Bucherer boutique editions. I could totally see that being part of it now that they do have this partnership. Obviously it's probably going to be a slow iterative process, and we'll see if that ever comes to fruition with a brand like Rolex, but it does seem like they're playing around with things a little bit more, especially with some of their recent releases. It's going to be really interesting over the next coming months to see how this story sort of evolves and the impact that it has on watch brands. All right, so enough of Rolex and sort of all of that fun stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts though, so hit us up on Instagram, on our website. We'd love to hear what you think about this partnership. Moving on to MB&F. MB&F released 2 new Sapphire Vision editions of the HM9. To give you a little bit of background, in 2019, MB&F presented the Horological Machine number 9. It was nicknamed HM9 Flow, and it was essentially a tribute to the automotive and aeronautic designs of the 1940s and 50s, with this really cool sort of epoch-flowing aerodynamic lines that the case had. It was really complex to actually make this piece. It had 2 fully independent balance wheels and a central planetary differential, performing the task of sort of averaging the 2 distinct heartbeats into one coherent time pulse. 2 years later, they released the HM9 Sapphire Vision editions, which were essentially the HM9, except the shell of the case was transparent. They were produced in very limited editions with only 5 pieces, because the cases, obviously being in sapphire, were very, very difficult to make, and they're essentially 2 flat slabs that are screwed together. Again, it retains a lot of the sort of curved lines and very impressive construction that they had. Today, or I guess this was last Thursday when you're going to be listening to this, the MB&F presented 2 new HM9 Sapphire Vision editions with their sapphire crystals. Both of them limited to 5 pieces each. The first one was an 18-karat yellow gold frame with a green CVD movement, and the second was an 18-karat white gold frame with a blue CVD movement. Taking a look at these pieces, they are so cool, and I think having a sapphire case like this piece is the perfect sort of portal into being able to produce pieces with these really cool colors. These pieces are big. They're not small on the wrist by any stretch of the imagination. But again, these are pieces of art more than anything. And I think they look phenomenal. I think the combination of the green treated movement with the yellow gold accents on the case of the HM9 is a beautiful combination, especially because the green is not super dark. It's got this kind of light but modern reflection to it, obviously with really beautiful finishing on it as well. And then the blue and white gold is also really phenomenal, but the green and yellow gold really stands out to me as one of my favorites. Each of them, obviously, like I said, they're limited to 5 pieces each. So again, fairly limited in quantities. I think it meshes nicely with the purple and because they've come out. They've had a couple of versions of these, and I'm going to get I I want to make sure that I tell you exactly the different combinations that they have. So bear with me really quickly. So they have the like I mentioned, the blue and the blue with 18 karat white gold. They have the green with 18 karat yellow gold. They then have a black version with red gold. They have a dark blue version with red gold. They have a red gold sort of movement finishing and white gold case. Then they have that purple one that I was mentioning in the Sapphire Visions. So a cool iteration on this HM9. Nice progression for the company. Beautiful looking. My favorite is 100% the green with 18 karat yellow gold. I think it's a great combination. I'll leave a link in the show notes to the HM9 so you can see pictures while I sort of talk through it. It's really some beautiful pieces. I keep sort of being impressed by MB&F and what they decide to come out with. Honestly, it's funny because when you see pictures of these, it sometimes is hard to comprehend. But when you see these pieces in person, it really puts it into perspective on how difficult the difficult challenges that MB&F tries to face and obviously accomplishes positive results when they really do go at these pieces. So absolutely love it. Congrats MB&F. I'm sure that these will go pretty quickly. Shorter episode today, but I hope this gives you a little bit of watch news just before Geneva Watch Days kicks off. I'm excited to see what is released and what sort of are the headlines for a lot of these companies, especially because they're companies that we love. I personally love, so I'm looking forward to that. If you didn't see, we're going to begin to talk about a new group of watches. I'm very excited to do that. So our first video we'll be covering is going to be released tomorrow. So check out lifeonthewrist.com tomorrow for our article and video where we'll go into one of the pieces that we have in one of four. So kicking off another sort of group of watches that I'm very excited to get into. So check out Life on the Wrist tomorrow for that. But if you follow our Instagram, you'll probably get news for all of that coming out. If you are feeling generous and wouldn't mind rating this podcast, it really does help me out. Share it with a friend who might be interested in watches. That also helps me out greatly. With that said, guys, thanks very much for listening to this podcast, and we'll catch you in the next one.